LivinSport, the show that delves into the lives of people immersed in sport. In this episode, our guest is Obadele Thompson, the first athlete to win an individual Olympic medal for Barbados. Obadele Thompson, a face that we don't see often enough. I would suggest a voice that we do hear from time to time, but an athlete who we all enjoyed watching some years ago. You're still a household name in Barbados, and we do fondly remember, all that you presented for us. But now we have to be content with your commentary and analysis at major events, and also your, let's say, your entry into administration. But really and truly, Oba, how challenging was it to transition from top athlete to another aspect of life?
Thanks for having me on, Philip. I will say that, like many athletes, there's a period of time when you're nearing the end of your career where you don't know exactly what you're going to do next, especially if sports has taken up so much of your life, from primary school, secondary school, and if you've gone beyond that, and professionally as well. And there was a period of time where I wasn't 100% sure of what I would do. And then eventually I went to law school and I did all of that. And of course, now opportunities as you mentioned, to come back in other capacities in sports have emerged over the past couple of years. So that has allowed me, in a sense, to complete the circle. But for many athletes, it is a struggle. And I went through that.
You said you went to law school, so you're involved in the legal profession?
Yeah, I'm actually a licensed lawyer here in Texas.
So how's that been going? Are you a practicing licensed lawyer?
I worked for a big law firm for a couple of years, and now I do more of the people management side. The company I work for, we do more of providing services to law firms and to big companies. And so I end up managing people more than anything else. Despite, I won't say I have a huge love of the law. It is very interesting, but I also like the flexibility that it gives me to be able to have time with family and to do other things that interest me.
So you talk about family. Tell us more about your family situation. We learned recently about the exploits of your son, and we'll get to that. But I'm sure there's more to family than your son, who seems to be following in his dad's footsteps.
One of the things that I have really tried to do is, especially as my two youngest kids have been in their teenage years, as people who have teenagers know, those can be some extremely, or don't even let me say extremely, but those can be very pivotal transitional years for them. So I have tried to give myself more time to spend more time around them, and having flexibility at work to do that is something that I purposely try to do. I think about the fact that I went to university. I went to the University of Texas at El Paso, UTEP, when I was 17 years old. And most recently, my son Amir, who just turned 17 2 months ago, he is now going to the University of Texas on an athletic scholarship. And it's amazing. I'm sure many people who have children know, like, that period between them being, 10, 11, and then all of a sudden they're young adults and then possibly out of the home. That can go very quickly. So I've made a more concerted effort to spend time with them. My son now does athletics. My daughter, she is 15 and she plays volleyball. And, just being able to attend her games and tournaments. Unlike in Barbados, over here in the United States, when you become involved in sports in high school, I guess the equivalent is where we say secondary school. And then if you play club sports, usually that occurs during the summer months, it's very hectic. There's a lot of traveling, and it's just very involved parenting, especially if you have a child who's involved in sports. So that was one of the big reasons for me making a decision to not focus as heavily on, working as hard for the legal part of my career, like being in a law firm, just working very ridiculous hours. I'm sure people who have seen lawyers who are on top of their game know that it can be very time consuming. So that aspect of it, just more so the parenting side of it.
So your daughter, you said she plays volleyball. How's she doing?
She's actually really good. She there's a big club system here in the United States, and that's one of the things that I had to learn. But she did gymnastics at first, and then she was all into gymnastics, and um, she had the opportunity to play volleyball. Now she is sort of tall. She's not really tall here in the United States because the population here in the United States is about 300 million compared to about 300,000 for Barbados, and so she's about 5'9" and growing. So we have this joke about who's the shortest among all of us. But she does really well.
You.
I have long legs. That's what people don't realize. I'm short, but I have the legs of someone who's about 6'1",
Uh-huh.
which is why I think a lot of people when people meet me, they're surprised at how short I am in person. But then if I stand next to them, they realize how long my legs actually are. They're very, very long. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so she has long legs. My son Amir has long legs as well, and they do well in sports. They love it. They do it because that's what they love to do. So she is very good. She's um, won awards and stuff like that for her volleyball. So we'll see where that takes her.
Well, recently we've been hearing about your son and his exploits. Tell us about him and following in his dad's footsteps and all the genes that tend to, or I should say, potentially could make him a pretty good athlete.
Yeah, well, I would say he is following more than my genes. I think I followed my dad's genes. My dad, um, I guess you say doctor, professor, whatever you want to call it, Alvin Thompson, who taught at University of West Indies, taught Cave Hill for many years, and he's retired now. He's originally from Guyana, and he got a scholarship to go to do his undergrad at Mona campus in Jamaica. And while there, I believe he won I can't remember what year it was. It might have been 63 or so, I think, the Jamaican National Championships. And he won the 1966 British University Championship. So that's in the 100 meters or yards. I can't remember which one, but that's equivalent to an NCAA title. So, the academics and the athletics going together. So I am sort of like a 2.0 version of my dad, you know, and then I look at Amir as perhaps a 2.0 of me or a 3.0 of my dad, depending on how you look at it. So he came to athletics very late. He was a basketball player. He won awards for basketball, but um, during his senior year in high school, so over here it would have been 12th grade, that's what they call it. He finished the season and he won his school district, but he was a two-time back-to-back defensive player of the year for and a first team in terms of the accolades for his abilities on the court. But he didn't have any scholarship offers. And then, over time I've thrown out to him about running and he says, okay, dad. And he would say, it's not my thing, dad. And I think around one meet back in 2018, and anyone who saw the footage of it knew he was a natural. Everyone's wondered when he was going to run. And so he decided to do it. And, I was able to coach him and he did really well this season. I mean, he progressed extremely quickly. And I think, there's a genetics between, his mom and me. And then like I spoke about with my dad. So that's the natural genes, but then he had the propensity to being coachable. He's very, very coachable young man. And then he found his rhythm and he's done really well.
In listening to you talk about your son, it sounds almost like you're talking about yourself. Because
I know.
no. What I mean by that is the pathway. Now you are very influential, obviously, in their lives, and with respect to your son and the track and field, of course, your daughter as well as you outlined. But then you also mentioned your dad, and not only from genetic point of view, which you pointed out, but we know that he has played a major role in the pathway that you took. So that's what I meant. It seemed as though the way in which he influenced you and assisted you and was there for you, you now seem to be doing that for your children as well.
Well, I think that's how it's supposed to be. I think parents, in as much as they're capable, should be the ones guiding their children's future, seeing what potential they have, and really thinking consciously about how you can help them realize that potential. Some people are more equipped than others for various reasons. Some people have greater access to their children. Some people actually know what their children are interested in. Some people can identify it, and they're familiar with how to be able to get their children to be better. But I think most parents, I like to believe most parents want the best for their children. It just so happens that in the realm of sports and with academic things, I was more familiar. So even with basketball, I played basketball when I was at Harrison College. I was not very good. My aspirations far exceeded my abilities. And then when you're my height, there's nothing really, I think in college in the United States, well, there was no scholarship for me. And I was fortunate to have my PE teacher, Mr. Orlando Green, point this out to me, perhaps not in the most politically correct way in 2024. Back in 1992, 93, of course, it's a different era, but he made it very clear that that was a dead end for me and I was wasting my time with that. And I'm fortunate that he was able to, I guess, arrest me from my childhood ignorance and naivety about that. And so, again, even if it's not a parent, having someone around who is able to help young people realize their potential to see what the better opportunities are, I think that's also important. So when you hear me, it's yes, it's my father doing it for me and me paying it forward, in a sense with my son. And what I tell him is, if you have children, I'm very clear about it that that's his job too as a parent. Now, we're not, any parent knows you're never going to be perfect. We all make mistakes. There are things that we look back on that we regret, things that we wish we pushed harder for, or didn't push as hard, things that we missed, and so forth. But I think generally the role of parents and even the people who are teachers and influential in children's lives, coaches, and so forth, I think it's very important to help them to understand their gifts, abilities, opportunities, and the challenges that they will have before them, and try to give them the best opportunity to do well for their lives.
You mentioned your coach, Orlando Green, and it seemed to trigger something in my mind about the manner in which he helped you to recognize your own potential. A story that you told me some years ago, in terms of maybe his vision you, which you didn't necessarily see initially. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so like I said, I love basketball. Basketball at a certain stage was my first love. Even though I always ran, I ran when I was at Charles F. Broome, because I ran at Charles F. Broome when I was really young. I think I was an infant, and then I moved to Wesley Hall when it was all boys for primary school. And I never won. I never outright won a race at Wesley Hall. I think I tied in one race. That there are a couple of things I learned from that, but we used to have this thing called garden, which anybody who was around in my time, just before my time at Wesley Hall, knew it was an overgrown garden, but it was fenced in, and we would run for the whole of lunch around that, doing basically a relay. So you get a stick and you run a lap, or you run two if you do three, and then you pass it off to someone else. You just run, right? Which I think was very instrumental in me learning how to be competitive, learning how to push myself. This is me looking back at things and, considering how I became who I became. By the time I reached Mr. Green, I had already known how to run. I had already watched the Olympics, the 1984 Olympics, which ironically, he was the coach of the 4x4 team with Elvis Ford and others that came sixth at the Olympics and still holds the national record in the 4x4 some 40 years later. So I got to hear his stories. I also got to hear his stories about when he had won the top times in the world in 1976. He was an Olympian. And the person that took him to the Olympics was the late Frank Blackman, Blackie, who was my longtime coach. So I think the story that you're talking about is when I had won Carifta, I think 2 years at under 17, and it was my first year in under 20. And I remember exactly where it was by the pavilion, which is again, ironically now renamed after me, uh, standing outside there telling Mr. Green that I wanted to be the best junior. And then he said, in the world. Well, what I was thinking about, I wanted to be the best junior in the Caribbean. And so when he said in the world, it really expanded my thinking because I had never thought about being world class like that. You know, Carifta was the tip of the iceberg. You know, we had a couple of people that I grew up seeing, like on TV, for example, Siebert Strawn and some of those others that I knew who had gone on scholarship and I come back. But for me, the idea of scholarships and those type of things, and again, remember, this is a different era. This 30 plus years ago, or, you know, 30 or so years ago, it's a different era. And because of that, my thinking about, well, if he thinks I could be one of the best juniors, you know, under 20 athletes in the world, that really expanded my thinking. And then his foresight to be able to recognize with me and with Andrea Blackett, Melissa Straker, several others that went to school at the same time, that the person to help them develop in the sprints was, again, Blackie, and bringing Blackie in to help coach us because he realized his limitations. That was very big as I look back on it, because many coaches may not necessarily take that approach to say, you know, I've reached my limit. There's someone who's even better to help you develop. And so that was also significant. And it was a big life lesson as well to realize that we all have limitations, even though we may want to be the ones to proverbially take or to take you to the proverbial promised land. Sometimes there may be someone who's better equipped, and it might be time to hand someone over to that other person or give the other person an opportunity to carry it forward.
So your thoughts on Blackie, who obviously was so instrumental in your whole development.
Yeah, I miss Blackie. I think about it constantly. He passed away in, I think, 2021 or 2020, 21. It was 21 actually. And I remember the call that I got from his son, you know, to say, you know, dad's gone. And I remember I was on a Zoom call as well. And you know, it comes in waves. It comes in waves because Blackie was more than a coach to me. Blackie was like another dad to me, you know, and people who know him, they call him the doyen, right? He was just really, really good. And as a testament to how much I trusted Blackie was regardless of the time of the year, regardless of who I was training under, from the time I was in with him until all through college, and even as a professional, whenever I came to Barbados, the only person whose workouts I ever did was Blackie's. Regardless of whatever any other coach wrote on a piece of paper, if he says do 2 of this, we're doing 1 of this, whatever, that was my assignment, and I believed him 100%. And I know he touched the lives of many people at the various schools that he coached. You know, when I'm at home and I bump into people, they'll always talk about Blackie, you know, people older than me, people from so many different walks of life. The influence that he had, if you look, he is probably singularly the most influential coach that we've ever had in Barbados in athletics for sure. And he was just brilliant. And I'll tell you one story that really, you know, I knew it, but it confirmed many things. So back in 1988, at the Texaco Games, which Orlando Green was responsible for that as well, being I think the meet director. And you remember, those who were around would remember that it was the mixture of races on the velodrome with cycling, and then on the track, and they would go back and forth there. And it was just very, very, very good to have so many world-class people come in. And Linford Christie came to Barbados that year. And I always remember Blackie saying he helped Linford with something, you know, or, you know, took Linford through his paces, as people might say. And, you know, it's like, okay, Blackie's just saying that. And I remember sitting down with Linford at the World Championships and saying, you know, my coach had said that he worked with you. I said, Blackie. He said, yeah, Blackie, really, really good coach. I just thought it was amazing because that was, at least at that stage, that probably would have been almost 20 years later. And Linford still remembered him. And I've had other people who, when I describe things, who've not even met Blackie, but saw my progress or would see things that I would do, I realized that it had to do with my time with him. And even the way that I coach with my son and the way that I explain things to people, it's been heavily influenced by Blackie. So I think, Blackie's deeply missed for the person that he was and also for his coaching abilities. I think a lot of people owe their or part of their athletic success to him, including coaches and administrators.
How would you define your career, your athletic career, in terms, let's say, of your own expectations and your understanding of the talent that you possess and the goals which you set for yourself?
That's an interesting question. Like I said, I've had a lot of time to think over my career. There are not many things that I regret. There are things that the famous saying, what youth is wasted on the young. And I don't feel like if I wasted things, but wasted my youth and wasted my talent, I don't think I tapped into it as much as I should have and as much as I could have. And there were various reasons for that. There are things that my father told me. I have a letter from my dad that he wrote me in 1995. It's a typed out letter. He told me X, Y, and Z in preparations for the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. I look over that. I did some things that I clearly should have done or focused more on. I think about, everyone would see me and see how skinny I was and, the lifting. That's something that I think I should have taken more seriously, but I was never the type of sprinter that was going to be big and powerful because that was not my strength. So I was more of an elastic type of runner. You hit the ground and you rebound very quickly. But at the same time, the lifting would have helped perhaps in two major ways. One, the ability to generate more power. And then number two, to be able generally to be stronger, to withstand a season or to withstand many more hard performances on the body. So I think for those two aspects, not necessarily beefing up or anything like that. That's not who I was. I put on the weight after or at the end of my career. But those two things and just mental approaches to some of the competitions. But overall, I'm pleased with my career. Right? And one of the things about it is, and this hard for many athletes, is to be able to walk away and to be at peace with what you've done. I wanted to win the Olympic Games. That was my goal. And I remember I was on a flight, I think in 2004, and I realized they were showing a piece on Carl Lewis, who I used to look up to. I modeled a lot of my running after his running style. And it just occurred to me, but you don't need to win the Olympic Games for your life to be validated. And it was like such a relief to me because all I can be is me. All I can give at that very moment is the best that I can give. My mom used to say, once you do your best, angels can't do better. And for me, once I was at peace with the idea that when I stepped on the line, I gave what I had. Now, it could have been better at some stages in terms of the cap, in terms of the absolute best that was possible of me, could have been higher if I did certain other things. But I knew when I ran, usually I gave my best. I didn't walk off the track with many regrets about the actual performances that I did. I might have some questions about things that I prepared to do where, yeah, maybe I should have done a little bit more of this or less of that. But in terms of the actual, when I got to the track, no, especially at the Olympic Games were where I really put a lot of energy, far more than World Championships, far more than any other beat. It was the Olympic Games. And I was very fortunate that in the 5 races that I ran, I made 4 finals and in sprint events. And that's not very easy to do over 3 Olympic Games.